Yeah.
Okay. G, C, and C. So the first one is G, the last three are C's.
What does G sound like?
Good, that's awesome. Okay, so I'm going to invite everyone to stand with us as we sing Everlasting God.
Good morning, guys. Today's biblical blessing chose a verse that really struck me because it's total opposite of what I would do or what many of us would do. So if you guys can turn with me to Matthew 8, verses 5 through 7. And it says, "Now when Jesus had entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him, pleading with him, saying, 'Lord, my servant is lying at home, paralyzed, dreadfully tormented.' And Jesus said to him, 'I will come and heal him.'" The reason I say it's a total opposite of what I would do or someone else would do, because how many times have someone asked you to do something like, or even you get the first text, "Hey, what are you doing on Sunday?" And you're too scared to reply because you think they're going to ask you to do something, help them out. So you know they're probably, they're moving out of between this and this time. Can I go for a little bit? Or you're just too scared to go. But Jesus, without even hesitating, he straight up just said, yes, I will go. I will go and heal him if you need me to. And what even struck me harder is that he said it to a centurion, the Roman soldier, who he knew before it even happened would be part of the reason he was crucified. So even to his enemies, he was willing to help. So today, I'll give you guys a couple minutes to pray, some intentional prayer. Just stand, sit, kneel if you'd like. I challenge you to pray about to get rid of any selfishness that we have, to be able to help out without hesitation like Jesus did, and also help those who we believe may be our enemies, but just help them out as well. So if you want to stand, pray, kneel, sit, I'll pray for a little bit, and I'll end in a few minutes as well. Thank you for your ultimate sacrifice, God. Thank you for willing to help us when we don't deserve it. Lord, I pray that you help us cast aside our selfishness and love those who may not love us back, and show them your love. In that case, amen.
Our God is the Lamb that was slain. Jesus
Morning, church. I'm not sure why you guys are here today. I was sharing with Jasmine and Pastor Hafiz this week and then just last night at work, it was just a very heavy week. I work in a hospital, and there's a lot of things that this week, I don't know, I just couldn't explain in detail, but it was just such a dark feeling at work with sick people. And I don't know why you're here. I think God knew that I would have this week, so He allowed me to preach, because I needed to be in His Word this week. Maybe some of you guys came because it's just what you do, but there is a blessing about bringing your sins and you're asking for forgiveness from God. There's something that happens when you come to the altar and say, God, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to feel, how to deal with these emotions. I don't know why I had to see what I saw this week, but God, I know you're in control. Let's bow our heads for prayer. God, some of us had hard weeks, some of us had good weeks, and that's a blessing. But all of us at one point this week felt a little loneliness, a little bit of insecurity, a little bit of heartache, a little bit of doubt. Doubt that you truly are listening. During this week, there was a very good Bible study that was held with two individuals, and the topic was about that Jesus Christ felt. He felt the weight of the sins of the world. He felt the pain and shame, and it caused him to feel doubt. How then can we say, God, that you do not understand us? How then can we say that you do not know what we're feeling? God, at this very moment, I allow you to help me move out of the way, and that your message that is meant to be heard today may be delivered. And that if there's any distractions at this moment, God, may the just move those out of the way. Help us in Jesus' name, amen. I don't know if I was supposed to turn off this mic, the purple one, but I did. I don't think we usually use it. So, if you guys have been here for the past few weeks, you have been hearing our sermon series, which is Identity Crisis. Now, identity is a word that is being thrown around, and a lot of us were like, wait, they haven't touched on anything that I think identity was going to be talked about. But a lot of times, to help others, we must learn our identity crisis, our identity issues. And some of you might say, I don't have an identity problem. I don't have an identity crisis. I could guarantee you that all of us at one point, even this week, had a hard time realizing what Jesus wants us to be doing, needs us to be doing. So last week, I talked about Matthew. If you guys remember, in Matthew, there between Malachi, if you guys have the Bible in front of you, we did this last week. There is a page that usually, if you have a hardcover, there is a page in between Malachi and Matthew, and some of us skip it. But every time, just think about that, every time you move that page in the Bibles, if you have a digital copy, I'm a millennial. For the first time, I can say, I cannot give the perfect example if you have a digital Bible. There's a small gap in between the books, but every time you move that blank page over to Matthew, it's about 400 years you're moving. Just think about that. 400 years you're moving of history until Matthew shows up, and Jesus, of course, is coming. We talked about how the people of God, the Jewish people, which we like to always say, if only they had listened, they would know that the Messiah was here. Because they were expecting a political Messiah, someone that would take them from the Roman jurisdiction, from constant oppression, year after year, generation after generation. The Messiah shows up, and they're like, this cannot be the Messiah, because he's not really helping us. He keeps telling us to go even lower. He keeps telling us to be even more helpful. How can I be so helpful when I am so pushed down by the Romans? We mentioned a little bit the previous week about not knowing the commission, the Great Commission, not just the commission, the Great Commission, and how about 51% of individuals don't know what the Great Commission is. And the thought that was brought up was, how can you know what the Great Commission is if you don't know who the commission giver is? How can I
know what I'm supposed to do?
Know that I'm supposed to do it this way when I don't even know who is the one that is saying it? We use the example of clay. I like playing with clay because I am not that great of an artist. So I like to make little things, you know, and show off. And look, I made a little horse, and then they're like, that's not a horse, that's a blob. But the good thing about that is that I can roll it up and make it better. Hopefully get better. Watch some YouTubes. If you guys don't know how to do something, just go to YouTube. And you can figure out how to do a lot of things with a few simple videos. I was talking back and forth with Sam about the mixer and the Mevo. Sam's probably wondering, I didn't know David knew all this, and I didn't know either. I just figured it out 20 minutes ago watching a YouTube video. And this guy sitting in his living room trying to share with me, and I'm like, oh, now I'm an expert. And we're going to get to that because a lot of us in here are experts, or so we think. And that is the mindset that we have arrived at this moment. Now, the clay example. We usually like playing with clay because you can make something. If you don't like it, put it back. You make it again. You don't like it, you put it back. And the example was that that's what we do with Jesus. We have our clay Jesus, the one that we carry around. And if we don't like that Jesus, we put him back and we say, you know what, today I want him to look like this. You know what, in this situation, I want him to look like this. Well, when I'm with my church friends, I want my Jesus to look like this. But when I'm not with my church friends, and people are like, wait, you have church friends and not church friends? That's a thing? Anyone have that? Some of us are like, I don't even want to say that because we shouldn't have that. We shouldn't have church friends and not church friends. All of us should be mixing. It was such a great experience when I was able. Now, I'm not sure, my friend, maybe someone watches this that was in my flag football team, that we won 2 championships, by the way. Half of the team was made up of my co-workers, and half of the team was made up of my church friends. And now, my co-workers and my church friends are my friends. There is no difference. They just happen to not come to my church. Now, Luke. We're going to be focusing on Luke today. And we're going to start up in Luke 1. And I just want you guys to get there just so you know where we're at. And if you're someone that likes to take notes and say, okay, well, we started in Luke. This is a good place to just kind of hang out there for a little bit. Now, Luke. Something about mics that give you the right, you know, that right there, that sigh, that's how I'm feeling. But you guys just heard it, you know, that sigh. A lot of us do those sighs, and we're like, oh, I hope no one heard that. Are we having trouble with the audio on live stream? We're good? Okay, so make sure. Sorry, I saw a lot of thinking faces back there. So, Luke was not a disciple. But what was interesting about Luke, first of all, if you guys have ever looked at the 4 biographies of Jesus in the Bible, yes, 4 biographies, because the 4 Gospels are literally speaking of Jesus. Now, when you read Matthew, you're reading Matthew and he's presenting it as Jesus is the great teacher. So when you want to read Matthew, the focus should be Matthew's trying to present Jesus as a great teacher. When you read Mark, he emphasizes a little bit more on the miracles. So we see Jesus in action. Someone that went in there and got his hands dirty. Now John focuses a little bit more as Jesus is the Son of God. The Word became flesh. He's focusing on how Jesus is God. He is. Now all of them do that, but there's a focus on each one. Now Luke, a lot of us, how many of us like reading Luke? I like reading Luke because he expands so much, and I always wonder why he did that. Now Luke, obviously we know that it's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and then John. Luke does something very interesting.
Now, as far as we know, Luke did not walk next to Jesus and saw everything and wrote it down. Luke did something more interesting. He went and asked questions. He went around and saying, hey, so I heard you were with Jesus during this time. Can you tell me some of the things he said? He's writing it down. Now, a lot of us today might say, well, he probably made a lot of mistakes, right? Because why wouldn't you want to listen to the person that's walking next to Jesus as opposed to someone that went to go talk to that person about Jesus, right? A lot of us would be like, well, I don't know about Luke then. Now, we have to understand that today we have something called, I said it, YouTube. If I say, well, let's go to YouTube for this, none of you guys here, maybe some of you guys, because some of you guys still might feel like, well, you can't learn everything from YouTube. But most of you guys in here would say, well, yeah, let's go to YouTube. You guys would trust me. A few years ago, if I would say, let's go to YouTube, some of you guys might be like, YouTube? I don't know about YouTube. I don't think I trust it. As we go, the way we gather information changes. So we have to give Luke the ability to teach us the way he and his people did communication. We can't say, well, Luke, I don't trust you because you asked everyone and you weren't there. We have to give him a little bit more credit, not because he doesn't function in our time, but because that's how they did their communication. Now, we're in Luke 1, and it says, I'm going to read from Luke 1. Inasmuch as many have taken in hand to set in order a narrative of those things which have been fulfilled among us, just as those from the beginning were eyewitnesses and ministers of the word delivered them to us. It seemed good to me also, having the perfect understanding of all things, from every first to write to you orderly account. Now pay attention to this. It seemed good to me, having the perfect understanding of all things, from every first to write to you an orderly account. Most excellent Theophilus. Now, you're wondering, who is Luke writing to? Is he writing to me? Or was he writing to this gentleman? Now, according to the commentaries, and we probably would do this today. Anyone, any creative writers here? Any creative writers? If you were to write something so good, and you knew who had the ability to get that out, wouldn't you want that person to say, hey, I wrote something, can you read this? Because they would be like, well, this is really good. Or would you just give it to a random person? Maybe you would give it to a random person to say, hey, this is really good. But you would give it to someone that has the ability to spread it. If you're saying, this is ready to be spread. Now, Luke understood that this man had the ability to either, whatever he was going to write, he had the ability to then send it out and continue his work, and so it can be spread. Now, we went to a conference a few months ago, and there was this gentleman there by the name of James Emery White. No connection to James White, but it just happens to be that his name is James Emery White. If you're an Adventist, you're like, haha. If you're not an Adventist, you're like, oh. If you're a millennial Adventist, you're like, James White sounds familiar. I'll Wikipedia him later. And it's not a disrespect to anyone saying, well, that's why millennials can't be leaders. No, it is because our focus is different. We are still Adventists. Now, the title of this article that he writes is The Seismic Shift of Outreach. It says during the 1950s to the 1980s, and I'm already going to put the person in there, like a Billy Graham time. The way he would spread the word was, how do I get people that are not in the church in the church? So during that time, what he would do is preach Christ, bring him into the community, and then the community would show the people that came in the cause. So you would have these great gatherings of thousands of people. People would be baptized left and right because Christ was presented, and that's what they wanted. During the 1990s to the 2000s, according to the research and according to James Emery White, there was a shift a little bit. How do we get people that are not in the church, or how do we get non-Christians in the church? It shifted a little bit. Now, some of us might get a little with this, but Christ wasn't in the beginning. Some of us would be like, what? Every time we must adapt our approach. We must be like Paul. If we go here, we preach Christ like this. Christ is still the main message, but the audience is different. During the 90s to 2000s, according to the research, you bring the community. Hey, let me show you my community. Anyone wondered why CrossFit got so popular like that? Because they showed the community. The community. This is our community. Now people are like, that's not a church. The community was presented first. Then Christ, then the cause. But something happened around the year 2010s where this group called the Nuns, not N-U-N-S, the Nuns, but N-O-N-E-S, the Nuns. I think we've made a comment before, but usually if a patient comes into a hospital, they say, what affiliation are you? Religious affiliation. And usually you hear, are you Catholic or Christian? And then you go on. Anyone ever been asked that question in whatever form you're doing? During the 2010s, so if you're a parent right now and if you're wondering why your kid doesn't like saying, I am a Seventh-day Adventist, it is because we are in the 2010s and our minds has been shifted by society. We say none. I am a Christian, but I have no affiliation. Now, how do we bring people into the church? GoFundMe has been so popular because what do you present first? The cause. Now, the community is seen after you go in and you say, man, this is a community that's giving money to this cause. Then Christ is presented. Now, most of us have a hard time with that because we walk into church and we've been trained to present Christ like this. And the people are like, whoa, this is too much for me. Anyone ever said, this is too much for me in a church? I've said that before. My friends that have come to church have said that before. The cause. Now, this is a shift, and this is, people are wondering, what does this have to do with Luke? First of all, Jesus was revolutionary no matter where he went. Not because because he was Jesus, but because he always knew how to adapt to every single individual. He knew what he needed to say to that person, to that person, to that person. He didn't say, well, what does the church manual say? The church manual is extremely important. Mr. Flemmer, if you guys remember him, a few months before he passed away, I became an elder, or I was going to become an elder. And he gave me the elder's manual. And he said something to me that I'll never forget. And I don't think I've said it out loud before. He said, David, keep them honest. That's what he told me. Now, if you know Mr. Flemmer, you might be like, I know what he means. If you don't know Mr. Flemmer, you can ask someone that does. He just gave me the elder's church manual and said, David, keep them honest. He passed away a few months after that. I'll never forget that because the one thing that Jesus always teaches me is to keep myself honest. So when I bring a message, I can be honest to the person I'm bringing it to. Now, Luke starts off a little bit different than Matthew. Matthew, remember, started with the genealogy. Luke likes to add a little bit more Old Testament. He starts off with a story about a couple in the temple. He's trying to give more credibility in a different way. But the thing about Luke is that Luke presents Jesus, he's the Jesus for the people. Because he's going to show stories more emphasizing on how Jesus just went and talked to people. Now we're going to skim over a little bit to Luke 6. And we're going to get to the main. I told Pastor Hafiz, I'm vegan, but we're going to have some meat today. If you guys don't get that, ask someone around that laughed a little bit. I'm vegan, but we're going to have some meat today. Maybe some substance today. Trust me, broccoli has a lot of substance. Now we get to Luke 6, and Luke 6 refers to something we're used to hearing a little bit different. We're used to hearing from Matthew 5, the Sermon on the Mount. But Luke 6 has a different little meaning. He refers to it as the Sermon on the Plain. It's still the same message, but obviously we have a different person saying the story. Now, for the matter of time, for the sake of time, when we get to the Sermon on the Mount, the Sermon on the Plain, Luke is presenting Jesus. Hey, there's a big crowd. So picture this. I'm gonna do so we have 17 minutes, but to make sure I'm trying to make sure everyone gets this picture. Picture you've been invited to go hear someone talk. Now, let's just say it happens to be a church speaker, right? And you're like, you know what? I want to go. I've been kind of down, and so you have an idea what you might hear, right? Well, I'm going to go listen to this, so I know what I'm going to hear, but I just don't know how they're going to say it. Now, I was talking to Pastor Hafiz, and I tried to challenge myself and say, could we say that 100% of the people that went to go listen to Jesus speak at the Sermon on the Mount were ready to hear him speak as Jesus the Messiah or as Jesus as their Messiah? Remember, they wanted a political leader. Hey, we're going to a bunch of people that are going to go listen to Jesus. Maybe he is the Messiah. Look at all the people here. This could be an army. We can take over the Romans. And then they show up. I can't imagine that not everyone there didn't not have a sword kind of under them. Be like, whoa, when Jesus says we're ready to go, I'm ready to fight. Because remember, passion is, all of you guys in here came for a different reason. Hopefully all of you guys leave with a message, but all of you guys came because, well, someone invited me and I'm just here. Some of you guys came because you drove yourself. Some of you guys wouldn't be here if someone didn't drive you. Some of you guys, I like the newsletter this week. What was the title of the newsletter? Don't take a nap. Join us. I don't know how you would take a nap in the morning when you just woke up, but yeah, naps after you eat, and then, you wake up, you eat, and then you take a nap. That's my day off. No, I don't do that. Tell my wife. My wife's like, no, you're always up. Don't take a nap. Some of you guys are here because you read that and you're like, I was going to take a nap. So imagine 100% of the people really, they really go listen to Jesus because he was a great teacher. I'm pretty sure some of them, because some of us in here at this very moment had other intentions why we were here. So it would be hard to say that 100% of them went there to listen to Jesus. And then Jesus just starts. Being salt and light, fulfillment of the law, do not murder, do not commit adultery. I am pretty sure someone said, hey, I thought you said we were going to take over Rome. He's telling me not to commit murder. How do we take over Rome without committing murder? How does that work? Imagine, these are human beings. We have a hard time picturing some of these stories because we don't put ourselves in those moments. Divorce, oath, promises, eye for an eye. Love your enemies. Can you imagine going to the watch party, the best watch party that's going to happen Monday, the time where finally, well, they've done it before, but this is the year, this is the year that Mexico, and then you show up to Mexico watch party wearing a Brazilian jersey. Sorry, Pastor Hafiz. And you're like, wait, I thought we were going to talk about Brazil, because you came to Mexico's watch party. I'm pretty sure someone said, wait, you invited me to this? I just committed adultery on my wife last week, and this guy's telling me not to commit adultery? How did you know I committed adultery? Ever show up to a sermon and you're like, who told the pastor what I did this week? Who told him? Who saw my post this week on Facebook? Someone is friends with the pastor. That's why the pastor is preaching on that. Giving to the needy. Imagine showing up, individuals that have nothing, and Jesus is telling them, give to the needy. And they're like, how can I give when I don't have anything? Jesus knew what he was doing. He was speaking to a group of individuals that were tired of being pushed down by the Roman authorities. They were tired of years and hundreds of years of being pushed around, taken as slaves, told you can worship, but worship with our temples. Oh, that's your temple, we'll put some of our gods in there. They were tired. They were ready to just take over, and finally their Messiah was here. Their Messiah was here. You ever come to church and say, where is my Jesus? That's not my Jesus. And the person next to you is like, that's my Jesus. And you're like, well, that's not my Jesus. It's an uncomfortable feeling, but it's what I do. It's what I do. And I know we do that. Now they were there, and Jesus starts speaking. Love your enemies. Love your enemies? These people have been stealing from us. One of your guys is a tax collector. Love my enemies? You have a tax collector with you, Jesus. Aren't you the Messiah? Don't you know? Now, some of them probably left blessed. Most of them probably left blessed. Some of them were like, yep, this is not the Messiah. I guess we're still waiting. There's a group of people in this world that are still waiting for their Messiah. I listened to a podcast on this guy that he's a genius. But he truly believes the Messiah has not come because of his religious beliefs. He's a genius in the political thing, but he still believes that his Messiah is coming, and the big political figure will finally arise in Jerusalem, and he will take over. Now we come to a time today. Well, what does that mean to us? Remember the whole experts, YouTube makes us experts? According to the 20-minute video I just saw, I consider myself an expert on this mixer right here. That is, you can't see it, but I watched the video and I believe Sam, and then I did some reviews, and I became an expert on this mixer. But I can guarantee you, as I look around, some of you guys are truly the experts. But if we were to have a conversation, I would be like, yeah, well, I bought that mixer. I don't even know what brand it is. I'm serious. But I saw the video. Now, we live in a world where the term relativism is all around us. Relativism is the doctrine that knowledge, truth, and morality exist in relation to culture, society, or historical context, and are not obsolete. I'm going to say it again. Relativism. The doctrine that knowledge, truth, and morality exist in relation to culture. Meaning that the Bible is only relevant if the culture says it's okay that it's relevant. The Bible's teachings only make sense if society says it makes sense. What Jesus said then, he meant this because society tells him this is what he said. Are you guys, does that make a little bit of sense? Now, someone sent me a video and I saw it, and it's called Post-Truth Trends. We live in a world where everyone is an expert. Everyone at this very moment walked in today feeling like they were an expert on something. Now, anyone ever gone to his doctor and tell him, doctor, I have this, I need you to fix it? Because according to WebMD, this is what I have. Oh, wait, you're not going to give me this antibiotic? Oh, which one? Hold on. Amoxicillin. Why amoxicillin? Hold on. Well, according to this blogger, this is what they took when they had this symptom, so that's what I have. Now, we all laugh because we do that. I mean, I'm not a doctor, but every time my little girl is sick, my wife says she has this. I'm like, no, she doesn't. Now, I consider myself an expert. Why? Oh, because I work in the ER. But I'm not a doctor. I'm only using the assumptions of the symptoms that match her and say, well, this is what she has, even though she probably does not have that. And my wife is probably like, no, she doesn't, but okay. How many of us come to Jesus telling him, this is my problem. I want you to fix this. And he's like, no, that's not your problem. Let me tell you your problem. And we're like, no, that's not what I came with. According to WebMD, this is my issue. Guys, when people left the Sermon on the Mount, some of them left shaking like, man, this Messiah knows my life. This Messiah knows everything I have done. This Messiah knows my thoughts. He knows everything I think. He is the Messiah, but he's different. There's something different about him. I had a hard time with this sermon this week because I had to diagnose myself with Jesus' WebMD. Not with my WebMD, not with my knowledge. I could guarantee you, all of us, if we were to read the Sermon on the Mount, all of us will feel so uncomfortable because it would be speaking to us in everything that we do, that we think. And we're like, well, I would never do that. I'm not married. I can't commit adultery. I challenge you guys to look at that word, to study that word. I challenge you guys. If you're not married, if you're a young person, I challenge you guys to study that word. But when you do, be prepared to change your lifestyle. And if you don't want to study it, you know why you don't want to study it. When people left the Sermon on the Mount, people were wondering, or Sermon on the Plain, this has to be the Messiah. Now, some of them probably left, this is not the Messiah because he said so many things that make no sense to me. Now, fast forward. Jesus has been crucified. He laid on the cross. He felt the pain of the second death. If you've never heard the term second death, approach Pastor Hafiz and ask him if he's somewhere. I know. Oh, he's back there somewhere. Oh, there he is. If you've never heard the term second death, I challenge you guys to approach him and say, hey, what does that even mean, second death? He felt we have given Jesus less value because we tell him, you have taken my first death. But he took on the second death. What is the second death? The complete separation, not only of physical, but of the psyche, the soul, the mind, a complete separation from God. That's what he died on the cross for. He died for the penalty, because the wages of sin is death. The penalty that we were supposed to pay on that cross, he took that on. Now here we arrive here in Luke 24. Do a little shift. Luke 24, verse 13. I remember Pastor Gabe preached on this, but for some reason it just spoke a little bit louder this week. I've heard this story before, but there was something different about reading it this time. Luke 24, verse 13 is where I'm going to start. On the road to Emmaus. Now that same day, the same day meaning the first day of the week after people go to the tomb and realize that Jesus is not there. First of all, Luke does something very interesting. He always mentions females. He always remembers, and there were females. Now people say, well, he was doing that because maybe Luke had a lot of sisters. I don't know. And he wanted to make sure of that. No, because Luke was presenting a Jesus to the people, to everyone. He said, Jesus is not for just the Jews, just the man. He is for everyone. And later on we're going to hear something, but they had just left after the females went to the tomb because the females had more faith. They went back to take care of their Messiah that was in the tomb. The men were somewhere in there just like, oh, well, Jesus is gone. And the females are like, well, we'll do what we're going to do. And they show up, and they don't see him. They come to tell the disciples, hey, Jesus is not there. The disciples are like, no, we don't believe you. Then they go, oh, wait, he isn't here. And the females are probably like, we told you so. Now that same day, two of them were going to the village called Emmaus. This is verse 13, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, I'm going to stop right there. They were talking with what? With each other. According to the post-truth trends, we are very good of looking for those that we can talk with each other because we would be able to say, oh yeah, that's what I think, that's what I think, that's what I think. As opposed to going to someone like the pastor, no, because I know what he's going to say, or like the spiritual mentor, or like that friend that you only call when you want to hear the truth. But they were talking with each other because they knew that they can bounce back ideas. None of them would disagree. They wouldn't disagree with each other. Now, the second part of verse 15 says, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. According to the commentary, in this moment, Jesus was standing right next to the two men, but they were so inward focused with their own thoughts, with their own emotions, with their own perception of the Messiah, that they could not see Jesus right next to them. I've come to church and said, I did not hear anything from this message. That worship service, man, this other person could have done it better. Sabbath school, if only I went to the right class. They were so inward focused that they couldn't see Jesus next to them. Imagine that. We can show up to church and not see Jesus. We can read the Bible and not see Jesus if we are so inward focused. If we are so focused in our emotions and our thoughts, but Jesus is saying, focus on me. Focus on what I have to tell you. Now, Jesus had to be a trickster, kind of that guy that always plays pranks and just laughs. Because he says, what are you discussing together as you walk along? Really? Do you really think Jesus didn't know what they were talking about? They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know things that had happened there in these days? And then Jesus says, what things? Imagine. Jesus is asking them, what things? He asked about Jesus of Nazareth. And he's right there. They replied, he was a prophet, powerful in words. Now, if we have a few minutes left. They go on to tell Jesus his story. And then he said to them, he still doesn't reveal himself to them. He says, how foolish you are. How slow to believe all those prophets have spoken. Then what Jesus does, instead of saying, don't you guys get it? I am right here. He says, let's go study this together. Now, I'm going to skip to verse 28. As they approached the village where they were going, Jesus continued on as if they were going far. He was going farther. But they urged him strongly to stay with us, for it is nearly evening and the day is almost over. So he went in to stay with them. Now pay attention to this. If you guys ever wonder, anyone ever ask, how do I know what the will of God is? How do I know what I'm supposed to be doing? Then verse 29. But they urged him to strongly stay with us, for it is near the evening, the day is almost over. So when they went to stay with them, when he was at the table with them, he took bread and gave thanks, broke it and began to give it to them. Guys, if you invite someone to eat, do you get them to feed you? Say, well, I make the food, you feed me, right? No, it's your house, you're the one that invited. In their culture, if someone invites someone, the person that they invite doesn't break the bread because it's their house, their invitation. But we are not told why or how. Something happens here that they allow this man to break the bread for them. They say, you know what? Something is different about you because you're telling us here, you break the bread. You're in charge. And what happens to them as soon as they allow this man to be in charge? Their eyes were open and they recognized him. And he disappeared. When we allow Jesus to be in control, when we allow Jesus to truly be in charge of our lives, he will be revealed to us in that very moment. When we want to tell him what to do, when to do it, we will have an identity crisis with our own self because he's not matching. But when we are like these men, he will be revealed to us. I challenge you guys as we leave this place that the Great Commission that was given to us, or to the disciples back then, is still relevant today. I challenge you guys that as we leave this place, some of you guys might be like, yep, just another sermon. It's going to happen. That's who we are. That's how we are. I do that all the time. Some of us might leave this place and say, know what? Maybe I am going to do a little bit different approach in church. Or maybe I'll do a little approach in how I pray. The challenge should be to look inward so we can look upward. Look inward so we can focus on Jesus. Focus on Jesus so then he can allow us to truly look at those inner thoughts that you don't want to reveal to him. I challenge you guys as you leave this place that you can ask Jesus to be the Messiah he is supposed to be, not the Messiah you want him to be. He came here about 2,000 years ago. Remember, it was about 400 years that they hadn't heard his voice. It's been almost 2,000 years, and some of us are like, well, he is coming back. If you look at the research and statistics, our generation is believing less and less that Jesus is coming back because there's so many other things that are offered. I challenge you guys as we leave this place that we can truly look at the Bible and say, what is Jesus trying to tell us?